Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Monday, December 1st, 2025, and I don't know who the king of the rules-based order is, but I certainly know who the queen is, and there you have her on the screen, Kaja Kallas from Estonia, who is the High Representative of the European Union. She's the number 2, and so everything that Kaja Kallas represents and should do is wrapped around this tremendous rules-based order that the European Union is creating with all its structures, all its rules, all its checks and balances. Everything that it does is just oozes out rules and the correct way to do everything and how not to do things. So anyway, we have a country which the European Union is desperately trying to bring into its membership, Ukraine, and it's just can't wait for the day to bring this country in, and voila, there is a corruption scandal. Surprise, surprise. So not only that, Ukraine is known to be one of the most corrupt countries on the planet Earth, and it competes for that with some pretty tough competition, countries that can't seem to uproot corruption and get it out. It's like systemically there. So anyway, there is an incredible conflict between the image of the queen of the rules-based order, Kaja Kallas, and this effort that she's trying to make to bring the country of Ukraine into the European Union. So you would think that a corruption scandal would cause her to think 5 minutes and say, hey, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. But no, she doesn't think about that. She takes this question of corruption and just sweeps it under the rug. So here we have her press conference today, a few hours ago, 5 hours ago, and which was the result of a meeting of all the top EU people. So she came to give this press conference, and she dedicates exactly 25 seconds to the topic of the corruption, and really doesn't discuss the corruption at all. It just discusses about how they feel towards Ukraine. So let's take a look at what she was saying. So I'm going to play this short clip, and we can hear just how important rules are for the European Union when it comes to Ukraine, and how important this rules-based order is in the whole situation of the European Union, which is struggling. Its countries have low GDP. They are borrowing debt at worrisome levels. So these are countries that need to clean up their finances. And here's a country they want to desperately bring in, Ukraine, who has really zero guarantee that it will help the finances of the European Union. In fact, it will make it worse. It will become a bottomless pit of money. But anyway, we can hear what she thinks about the rules-based order and about accountability, transparency, and all that here as she speaks about the corruption scandal. So let's listen to her.
Territory. I also want to address the corruption probes in Ukraine, especially wartime trust matters. Ukraine's fight for freedom and its path towards Europe should not be tainted by this. However, the fact that investigations take place show that anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine work. Also, the public outcry for this has been very, very strong.
The public outcry, who cares about the public outcry? If you're a European Union and you're a rules-based order and you want to bring a country into your union which is corrupt to the core, which takes money and makes it disappear, and would indebt the other countries and sink all of them together like a giant Titanic, why would you even consider bringing this country in? But no, it doesn't matter. There's no obstacle in the way for Ukraine entering into the European Union. Simply, they will not consider any of these factors like corruption, as if, suddenly the rules-based order was chucked and we're just going to come up with these sentimental reasons or, basically Russia phobia. We're going to attack Russia. So anything that is against Russia is something we can incorporate into the European Union. So anyway, that was incredible. She gave 25 seconds to the corruption probe. She didn't discuss any of the details. She didn't discuss the individuals involved. You can't do a kickback scheme, one person receiving kickbacks, if you don't have somebody kicking over to the corrupt individual. So if it's a scheme and it was used over multiple years and with multiple countries, then there's a lot of mediators for that corruption. Where did the money come from? How is it delivered? Where is the money actually sitting? This so-called 100 million. We don't even hear anything about Mindich, who went to Israel and basically can't be returned to Ukraine because Israel won't allow that. But you don't have the European Union saying, hey, we want all these individuals together. We want to interview them. We want to know who was involved, what happened. And then this whole investigation was just completely flawed. They say that they went to one home of Yermak. They also went to the home of this Mindich individual who was like Zelensky's wallet. That's what they called him. So they go to one home. They do this, and we get, the result that corruption was involved. But we don't hear what they found. This could be a setup for Yermak, as far as I know. Somebody could have set him up. So we don't get any corroborating evidence. And this is the Yermak is the second in charge of Ukraine. You would think that there would be some kind of investigation. Who's really involved in all this corruption? And if they're going to go to Yermak's home, why not go to his beach house, to his dacha, his summer home, or where they have their little farming? He could have multiple businesses. He was an intellectual property lawyer, so he's going to have an office for that. He also had other businesses going. So there are multiple places. If he really was corrupt and was hiding money from the government or, stealing, he could have multiple places to keep them. They could have a storage unit, somewhere in Ukraine or outside Ukraine. I mean, they go to his house and he's guilty, so he has to resign, basically. So we get no information. We're forced to try to fill in the blank that they did an investigation. He's guilty, so now he needs to leave. So all this is just totally untransparent, no accountability. So here is the queen of the rules-based order, basically saying there's no obstacle for Ukraine to come into the European Union. Yes, this bottomless pit of cash which will eat into the European Union countries' finances until they have nothing left, until the people are poor and are sitting on the streets with their hands out asking for, a dime or whatever they're going to ask for. So this is incredible, but if we take a look at what are the top jobs for Kaja Kallas, we can figure out that so I went to ChatGPT and entered in what are the top 5 jobs for Kaja Kallas. She's to shape and lead EU foreign and security policy. So, anyway, what policy has she actually shaped? So we have a stance on Russia, but if you're gonna say that Russia is carrying out attacks on civilians, then at the same time, she also needs to be consistent and say, "Hey, President Trump, you're attacking innocent fishermen. Just driving a boat in the Caribbean." So we don't hear anything about that, and so it's incredible that she wants to be the rules-based order queen, but at the same time she doesn't want to speak out about issues which would affect EU finances. So is she concerned about a rules-based order, or is she just looking for something that benefits some narrative? So also her second job is manage and strengthen relationships with global powers, Russia, China. So she's failing at that. She may not like Russia, but Russia is there. It won't go away anytime soon. Russia has natural resources which, up until the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, was quite useful to the German economy. And the destruction of that pipeline affected Germany and other countries. So she hasn't spoken out about that, has she? And then coordinate EU's response to geopolitical crises, especially war, security threats, human rights violations. So what has she spoken out about in Gaza? I don't believe she's spoken out really anything, very little. So in Gaza is much closer to the European Union. Israel plays in the UEFA Cup games. They play with the European countries. So that certainly is an area where she could speak out, but she hasn't. Strengthen EU's global influence. Building strategic partnerships worldwide. What strategic partnerships has she built? Like zero. Build cohesion among EU member states. Mediating, brokering, compromise, and rallying a common EU line. So this is basically, the European Union is a union created by the European countries to help them have a more cohesive economic structure. And slowly this morphed into like this autocratic superstructure that begins to tell the countries what to do instead of working so that the countries can better work with each other and improve their GDP, improve their competitiveness. So here she is. She's not really doing anything like that. All she does, she gives a conference about giving money to Ukraine, and trying to get Ukraine into the EU, and what they're trying to do against Russia. So listen, if you're not going to do business with Russia, then that's not your responsibility to spend all your time on that. Your responsibility is to help the European countries become more competitive, have better relationships with other countries, build their GDPs. But all that is forgotten, and all the corruption in Ukraine has just been swept under the rug, and they just want to bring in this country, which will be like a giant black hole where all their money will go and never come out. So I'm wondering about I put another question to ChatGPT in 30 words. is systemic corruption considered outside of a rules-based order? Because we've heard Kaja Kallas speak over and over and over again about this rules-based order. It's the be-all and the end-all of all existence is the rules-based order, at least the one that supposedly is in place. And yes, systemic corruption undermines transparency, fairness, and accountability, placing a state functionally outside a rules-based order, even if formal institutions still exist on paper. So basically, if there's systemic corruption, the institutions can function on a state level, but that state is outside of a rules-based order. So if that's the case, why is she working so hard to bring Ukraine into the European Union? And that definitely won't benefit these countries. Now, I want to take this whole topic of corruption and why this matter came out when it did, and how it was presented to us. So what we were presented was there were basically two responsibles for this corruption. It was Mindich, who fled the country to Israel. That, of course, is a story that has its own doubts, which I presented in another video. Just basically, they went to his house to do a search, and he had fled his house a few hours before, and he fled the country. Well, it's not so easy if you're in Ukraine, because you got to go to Poland to catch a flight. So at some point he had to cross the border, and all border crossings are checked by Ukrainians before people leave Ukraine. So his passport would have been checked. They would have found that there was a arrest warrant or something for him, and he would have been arrested at that point. So how did he get out of the country? So anyway, he disappeared, and when he disappeared, people went to his home. They supposedly found something that implicated him in a corruption scheme, and then the one person left was Alibaba, and Alibaba is Andrei Yermak. So again, Andrei Yermak, his house was searched, and then the next thing we know is that he resigned. So the question was, if they searched his house, then if Andrei Yermak was a very successful lawyer, and then he was into TV, and also was involved in politics. So there's someone who who's not poor, and so he's not just gonna have one home. He's gonna have his dacha. He's gonna have probably a beach house in Odessa. He'll probably have businesses located throughout Ukraine. He'll probably have storage units where he puts stuff. So you have these. You have the beach house. You have the dacha. You probably have some home in some other city. Maybe Kharkiv, because it's the second biggest city, and maybe he needs to go there a lot. So he has a home or an apartment or something. And then he has the storage units, maybe for his business, another one for his personal stuff. And then he may have, some items deposited in a bank. So you go to his home, and you don't go to the dacha, you don't go to the beach house, you don't go to the storage units, you don't go to his businesses, and you say that you did an investigation. So all that looks extremely suspect, and Andrei Yermak pleads innocence, and then he says he's going to the front. It's like, what is going on? So all this is just extremely suspect. So you say all this is going on in Ukraine. This NABU, which is supposed to be the be-all and end-all of corruption investigation, they didn't detect any corruption before. So somebody was asleep at the wheel, and then suddenly these recordings come out, supposedly between Mindich and this Alibaba. Alibaba's Andrei Yermak, according to the reports. And then they go to his home. So, and then he's gonna, if he's in the government, he probably has a few offices. Would they search his office? So all this is extremely suspect, and none of the news media is giving any real checks and balances to this whole Naboo faulty investigation report. And so you can go to check here in Google and do a search about this probe into Andrei Yermak, and all these articles are from 3 days ago. So we have one here 8 hours ago. Well, that's just repeating some of these other ones. More from 3 days ago, 3 days ago, 3 days ago from BBC, 3 days ago from New York Post, 3 days ago from The Guardian. So you can see that this investigation was just flawed completely. And none of these news media is following up. So for me, what happened was this was a face-saving measure for Zelensky. They put part of it on Mindich, who has Zelensky's wallet, and he fled the country. And of course, fled the country. They let him go at the border. So obviously, they didn't want him being interviewed for one reason or another. And then they raid the home of Yermak, and he resigns. End of story. So that's what they want us to believe. End of story. But obviously this is like faulty, and all this news media, which is supposedly independent, does their own investigation, comes to their own conclusion. They're all just repeating the same. They're just all repeating the same. BBC, Zelensky top advisor resigns. The Guardian, Zelensky top aide quits. Well, he's not the top aide. He's the chief of staff. He's like, some people considered Yermak to be the acting president, and Zelensky was just a figurehead. But in any case, all this just, speaks for narrative building. And if now we go on and see what's going on with this press conference. So we're going to move on from the Andrei Yermak corruption scandal and move on here to another point, which is that Europe is being forgotten in this whole process. So here's Kaja Kallas. What is her job again? Her job is to strengthen EU's global influence. So this person is making a question, but he's really questioning whether she's actually doing her job or not. So let's listen into the question, and we'll get in briefly to her answer.
Going on between the US, Russia, and Ukraine. When the first peace plan came out, Europe scrambled and managed to somehow get back involved in the negotiation process, but now it seems that Europe is once again being excluded, and being purposefully excluded by the US. So do you get the sense that the US is cutting out Europe from this latest round of negotiations? Do you have any idea what Mr. Witkoff is going to negotiate with Putin in Moscow? And are you fearful that he will once again try to force Ukraine to make more concessions?
Thank you. I'm afraid that all the pressure will be put on the victim.
So, anyway, the question is Kaja Kallas doing her job? Is she fulfilling her primary duty, which is to increase the EU global influence? And her answer is, are we blaming the victim? She's going to go to Ukraine, okay? It isn't. I've had difficulty working with the current president of the United States, and he won't let us, he's not he's blocking us from having the global influence we want to have. This is a question whether she's doing her job or not, and she comes back with an answer. Basically just throwing in Ukraine. It's totally irrelevant to the actual question that was made about EU losing influence, losing impact, being excluded. So she's like, okay, how am I going to answer? We're blaming the victim, Ukraine. No, it's nothing to do with Ukraine. So anyway, crazy stuff from Kaja Kallas. Maybe she didn't quite understand the significance of the question, but she certainly shows that she's deflecting from basically the blame being falling on her for not doing her job. So maybe she should say, well, I haven't been able to do my job properly. I don't know. There's some obstacles. People aren't helping me, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'll resign. Okay, no. She's here to prop up Ukraine. It doesn't matter what the question is. She will just come back to Ukraine. And this question actually was pretty important. It's about the EU basically being excluded, put outside the room, and sitting in a chair waiting to be brought in. She is incapable of answering that. But more than anything else, she's incapable of admitting that she's not up to the job. So here's another question. Okay, the point here is that the EU needs to look for options, because the EU is basically, the leaders of the EU are there to try to improve the economic situation for the European Union countries. So that's for them to have better GDPs, have a better economic life. And so this question comes and asks about being kind of the worst case scenario, being shut out from a future situation with Russia, Ukraine, and at the same time being excluded from the United States. So basically being left on marooned on an island. So again, this question comes back to her job. Is she doing her job? And what is her job? Her job is to coordinate EU's response to geopolitical crises. But basically, the point of all that is to improve the economic life, improve the situation in the European Union, because a European Union that simply guides the European Union countries to economic collapse is a European Union which has failed. So here's the question, and some people found it funny or ridiculous, but it's actually a really important question, and I think that this question hits the nail on the head. So let's get to it here.
Hi, Rep. Mattia Bagnoli, ANSA, the National Italian News Agency. I want to ask you a broader question, because I think that we can all agree that last week was extraordinary. And if what we read is correct, and the Americans are indeed negotiating with Russia for access to their market, to the Russian market, to the exclusion of Europe, we would be facing the sum of all fear in a way, because a bad deal, possibly a bad deal on one side, and something very worrying on the other. So wouldn't be at this point perhaps useful to open direct negotiation with Moscow and send there a kind of a European Witkoff? Thank you.
So Kaja Kallas found this question so ridiculous that she is holding back any laughter or or negative reaction, but she can't help herself. But this question is fundamental to the European Union, the access to resources that European Union countries need to improve their economies. So, but basically for Kaja Kallas, the idea of reaching out to Russia is the most ridiculous idea she's ever heard. So here is her response.
Well, everybody has been very clear, especially the Russians, that they have no interest in peace.
So here we have a question about economics, about the economic life of the European Union, about its future, about being marooned, about being the sum of all fears for the European countries, being cut off from the growth possibilities that exist in a post-war scenario. And Kaja Kallas finds this question so ridiculous, and she answers not by a question about economics. Her answer is completely irrelevant to the question that was asked. And again, I ask, is Kaja Kallas really up to this job? Why is she even in this position in the first place? So her answer is, just par for the course for her. It's just ideology, economics out the window. We can indebт ourselves. We can have low growth. We can have societal upheaval. We can have the collapse of our of our financial system. That's okay as long as the ideology is respected. So I think a lot of European countries at this point are asking questions similar to that reporter. So the sum of all fears, where will we be left in the post-war scenario with the U.S. having all the growth possibilities and the European Union left marooned? So, this was a train wreck for Kaja Kallas. She's incapable of addressing the basic fundamental responsibilities of her duty and of carrying out actions that are of benefit to the European Union nations. So this kind of sums up where we are at in Europe and why the situation hasn't been resolved. So I really kind of fear for the European Union countries and their future, have people like this in charge. So, there's no transparency, there's no accountability. They want to tie themselves to a country which is totally corrupt, which is be a black hole for their money. It'll just go in there and never come out. And the other possibility is that Ukraine loses and then Russia gains access to all these areas. There will be some rebuilding. So this would be opportunity for European countries to be involved in the rebuilding. So they will be left out. And the reporter is asking, well, the U.S. will have all the opportunities to go in and we will have nothing. We have chosen to be left outside this post-war scenario by our own doing, and this could imply the sum of all fears for the European countries. So what are you going to do about it? And she just basically just comes back with some irrelevant answer. There's nothing to do with the question. This is an economics question, and she just is not grasping the whole affair as, it's just all ideology. It's Russia phobia, Russia hatred, and this is what driving their policy and which will eventually drive these European Union countries into the ground. So I think Sergei Lavrov of Russia said that the European countries still have the opportunity of saving their ship before it sinks, but with people like this in charge, it's hard to say if they have any opportunity at all. So anyway, kind of a long report. Sorry about that. But anyway, if you like this report, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you back for another video. Bye-bye.